Welcome back to another video for you guys here today on Madden 21. Now today it's not going to be a rebuild or any of my normal franchises or anything like that. Today I'm just going to try to give you guys some tips on how to do better in rebuilds. Now of course I'm not, the best at all this stuff, but I've been doing it for quite some time. Throughout the past couple Maddens, I've been uploading YouTube videos of me doing rebuilds and doing franchise mode stuff in general, so I have a pretty decent understanding at how all of this stuff works, and I usually get asked like what playbooks I use and like what my experience sliders are on and how to draft better and to do stuff like that. I get asked that all the time, so today I'm going to be making a video on how to do better in rebuilds, if that even makes sense. I'm just going to pick the Eagles because they're my favorite team. The team right now doesn't really matter because I'm not actually going to be rebuilding them. Let me just show you guys here how I begin these rebuilds, like the settings I change and whatnot, but normally I go with a custom coach. I usually choose the motivator one because it just helps trades a little bit more. Then I'll just go ahead and change the name, that's me. Draft God, okay. I normally don't change anything else with the coach. I just keep the basic face, whichever one it starts out with. And then I'll go into the league settings and change some other stuff. So coach firing, I usually have off, just so I don't get fired if I'm like trying to tank in a season or something like that. Injury and pre-existing injury, also I always turn those off. If you want to do a rebuild with them on, go for it. Minimum roster size, I turn off as well, just so I can trade and, have the roster be under 46 if I need it to be. That's just easier to have off. Quarter length, I turn up to 15. I don't think this actually makes a difference, but I don't know. I just kind of like doing it. Weekly training, I usually have on auto just to get that extra experience, and, for all the focus players and whatnot. Tutorial pop-ups, I usually put on off. That just saves some scouting points. Like the first week you can scout, because if you have it on, it'll always go ahead and scout like the top prospect just to give you an idea of how to scout, but I know how to scout, at least a little bit. So I turn those off, and then auto progress players, I turn on as well. Of course, the maximum users, I usually just put it to 1, just so nobody else can join. They can't join anyway unless I invite them, or if you guys use this, password, but you can't join now that there's 1. Actually, hold on, I'm going to go ahead and put 2. So somebody can join this league. 1 person is going to be able to get into this league if they really want to. And that you're not going to be able to do anything because I'm never going to come back onto this franchise, but someone out there can join this league if they want to. I'll put it to 2. So there you go. Someone else can join this league if they really want to. I don't know, man. But whoever you are, that's awesome. Thanks for joining the league. But now let me just go into some trades. That's probably the next most important thing. I'll do that and then go over the playbooks and the experience sliders. Just looking through the team a little bit, I'll go ahead and try to trade like Deshaun Jackson. And let me see. Let me find somebody else who I know will have green interest with at least 1 team. Let's go with Malik Jackson. Defensive tackles are also pretty valuable in this game. So I'm sure 1 team, I've already seen a couple. There are definitely some teams out there who will give me a first-round draft pick for these 2 players. And if I had to choose between all these teams with at least green and yellow interest, I'd probably choose the Broncos. The Broncos sometimes play poorly, they sometimes play really well, but it's really easy to get first-round draft picks. If this doesn't go through, that's fine. I can probably just throw in like a running back and make this one go through. Even if they don't really need a running back, running backs are very valuable in this game. Most teams have at least yellow interest in like any running back. So there you go. That's a really easy way to get a first-round draft pick. What you normally look for, like as the baseline, is 2 green interest players will pretty much be able to get you a first-round draft pick from any team. Now there are some exceptions. Some teams you can't get their first-round draft pick with just 2 green interest players, and some teams you don't even need 2. Sometimes you can get it with like 1 green and then 1 yellow, but kind of as a baseline, 2 green interest players will get you a first-round draft pick for the most part. Also, like I was saying before, running backs have a lot of value. I don't know why, but in Madden, running backs have a ton of value. As you can see, Boston Scott has at least yellow interest in most of the teams here, and you can trade him for probably almost like Quentin Nelson straight up, because this kind of leads into my next point. Interior offensive linemen have like no value. I feel like they fixed his value a little bit because I feel like this used to be up into the yellow, but still, that's way more value than Boston Scott should have to the Colts. Right, and you can get Quentin Nelson very, very easily. Defensive tackles also have a good bit of value. Let's just use like Javon Hargrave as an example. He's pretty good as well, but 81 overall, 27-year-old defensive tackle can probably get this one to go through. Okay, so there we go. Quentin Nelson still has like no value. He's usually who I go out and trade for if I really need a guard, because he is like arguably the best guard in this game. And he is incredibly easy to trade for, and he's going to be like a 99 overall for probably like 6 or 7 years in a row. Let me try to think of like a couple other players who might be nice to trade for who aren't offensive linemen. I know that Jamal Adams isn't super difficult to trade for. Let me see if I can go ahead and do that with the pieces still on this team. This is a pretty good example of that right here. So Nickel Roby-Coleman and Derek Barnett can almost get this trade to go through. So Jamal Adams doesn't really seem too valuable, which is hilarious because he's incredibly good. So I don't think I'm actually going to be able to get this trade to go through, which is fine, but the point still kind of stands. Actually, I can get it to go through if I throw in a draft pick, maybe a 3rd round draft pick. That's close. A 2nd round draft pick is still a bargain for Jamal Adams. But if I had another player with green interest, I can probably get this one to go through. I'll just use a second round draft pick, just kind of as like a placeholder for that third player. But yeah, like this isn't really much value at all for Jamal Adams. He is very young. He's a superstar X Factor. He progresses very well in this game. So he's a player you should be looking to trade for if you need a strong safety. Now, another player I like trading for, I don't think I've done it in a little while, is Devin White. So linebackers in this game progress very, very well. As long as they're young, you can pretty much make like any linebacker into a superstar X Factor one day. So Devin White is very easy to get, and so is Ali Marpet. I don't know if this is going to go through, but it's going to be very close. Okay, so Ali Marpet is an 89 overall guard. He's kind of expensive, but he's definitely worth it. And then Devin White is a super young middle linebacker who is going to easily progress into superstar development at some point in the future. Also, Vita Vea from this team isn't terribly hard to get either. A bit more difficult than these guys, but still not too hard. I might be able to get this to go through if I throw in like a safety or something, or maybe another receiver. They do want Will Parks as well, so this is definitely going to go through. But again, I'm getting rid of 3 players who aren't that high of an overall, and we're getting Devin White, who is going to be like into the 90s at some point in a couple seasons. And we're also getting a really reliable guard. Vontae Maddox is definitely the best player I'm getting rid of. I would not trade him if I were actually rebuilding the Eagles, but he's kind of just there as like a generic 78 overall cornerback who has some youth to him, and there's a bunch of guys like that in the league who you are able to trade to some other teams. So don't necessarily pay attention to the specific players I'm trading, try to pay more attention to the overall. So like this exchange, I definitely think we won. That's kind of the basics there for trading in Madden. Pretty much what I do is just 2 green interest players for a first round draft pick. That's kind of what I keep in my mind. And then like 3 green interest players is a pretty good benchmark to get most players. Now, there's a bunch of guys who you can't trade for like at all. Patrick Mahomes might be one of them. I don't think I've ever really tried, but I'd imagine he's really hard to get. Aaron Donald is really hard to get. Players like that, they're kind of impossible to trade for. That's why you don't normally see me, go out and trade for them. But there are a bunch of really good players you can still trade for. Jamal Adams is one of them. Evan Ingram isn't super hard to get. He's definitely harder this year than he was last year. Quentin Nelson is like my favorite player to trade for because he is way too easy, to get in this game. Devin White, we already pointed out. Ali Marpet, any pretty much interior offensive lineman is very easy to trade for in this game. Let's go over the experience sliders here. I usually keep these all around like 140 or so. I feel like it makes progression all right. 140 to 150 is usually what I have these on. I'm not going to change them all, but that's typically what I'll do. 140 to 150 seems pretty good for me so far. But now we can go over the playbooks. For this scheme fit, I usually just go with whatever the highest percentage is. So on offense, the highest percentage here would be vertical zone run, so that's what I would choose. And then defensively, I want a 4-3, so I'll find the highest scheme fit that is still a 4-3. So 4-6 defense usually is the highest. It's not the case here. Base 4-3 is a 91, 4-3 under is a 78. And there's a 3-4, and there's a 4-3 cover 3. I normally don't go with that one, but it's typically either base 4-3 or 4-6 defense. I'm gonna go with base 4-3 for this one. The offensive playbook, you guys probably all know this by now, but the Titans offensive playbook has always been really, really good for me. And then defensively, I feel like the Eagles playbook probably isn't too bad, but if I'm going for the best possible record, I will go with Cleveland's defensive playbook in a 4-3. Now, if I'm running a 3-4, the Packers don't have a bad playbook. The Broncos, the Texans, they're all not too bad. But normally I'd go with like the Packers. That'd probably be my number 1-3-4 playbook. And then my number 1-4-3 playbook, definitely the Browns. And then the offensive playbook is pretty much always going to be the Titans. I might mess around with a couple other playbooks. Like in these realistic rebuilds, I'll probably use the team's offensive playbook, at least for the first season. So the most important piece of the depth chart here is definitely your specialist tab. So this dictates where a lot of your players are going to be playing most of the time. So you want to go through and make sure you have the players you want to start at each of these positions. So slot corner, if I draft a rookie cornerback, I'll usually have them play here because slot usually makes them have a lot of tackles, makes them have a lot of interceptions. Both of those could potentially make the player go up in development trait. Sub linebacker is incredibly important. I would not have Jalen Mills being the sub linebacker. I guess if I were doing this now, it would be Devin White for sure. But if it was like the base Eagles team, I guess Davion Taylor would probably be the number 1 sub linebacker just to get him as many tackles as possible. Normally, you want the guys who you want to progress to be in these specialist positions. So like a rookie linebacker would totally throw at the number 1 sub linebacker spot. Rush defensive tackle, again, just want like your 2 best interior D linemen here. So like Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham I'd be fine with. Brandon Graham can rush off the edge as well. But in this case, he wouldn't be bad there. Rush right end, I guess Jannard Avery would be there. I kind of gutted this team. It looks funny. But like Derek Barnett would normally be on this team, so maybe he'd be a rush end. Rush left end, Josh Sweat wouldn't be too bad in that role there. Slot receiver is incredible incredibly important. This is potentially the most important position because slot receivers get a ton of targets and a ton of catches in simulation, at least with the Titans offensive playbook. So that's why I can normally progress like 2 receivers very, very well. The number 1 receiver and the slot receiver. Those guys both play really well for me in pretty much all of my rebuilds. So in this case, it would totally be Jalen Reagor just because he's a rookie with hidden development trait. And then you have your power back and your third down running back. These don't seem like super important to me. I feel like your power back will get a lot of the goal line handoffs, so maybe they can like mooch some touchdowns. So if you want like maybe a backup running back to progress kind of well, maybe that's where you can throw them. But also, this is going to be important. So that's kind of it for the specialist tab, but this is going to be important. So for running backs, in my experience, this is just, you know, for me, I don't know if everybody has this experience. Low overall running backs never play well. Like Miles Sanders, I am certain will not have a good season in this franchise. That's just kind of how it works in simulation for me. Miles Sanders isn't a bad running back, you know, in real life. He plays pretty well for the Eagles, but like he's going to play terribly, I'd imagine, in this simulation. And running backs are usually really easy to trade for. So if you're looking just to upgrade your offense like immediately, just go out and get it like a 90 overall running back. It's usually really easy to do that. Like Nick Chubb comes to mind. He's very easy to get, and he's also very, very good. But now I'm going to advance, I think. Let me just go week by week, because there's something I want to talk to you about in the preseason as well. Your veteran players have an opportunity to mentor the younger guys on your team. So that's why it's kind of important to advance week by week in the preseason. So Jack Driscoll is who Jason Kelce is going to be mentoring. So I just went into pass block and then finesse pass blocking. The specifics aren't super important there, but now he's going to get a small boost to pass block finesse. And then if you advance by again, Jason Kelce will want to talk to you once more, and he will also give Jack Driscoll a boost in awareness. So this is pretty significant, at least like maybe an overall or 2, you know, throughout the course of a rebuild. It's definitely worth doing because it doesn't take like any time. And then Marquise Goodwin is going to want to mentor JJ Arcega-Whiteside. Sometimes this like glitches out because occasionally he'll ask you what you want him to improve with, and other times it'll just do that and just go away. I don't even know if that actually does anything, but yeah, it's worth pointing out. And then also in the last week of the preseason, you can go ahead and cut your players. This is definitely something you should be using, because let's just say I only had Carson Wentz at quarterback. Let's say Nate Sudfeld wasn't here, Jalen Hurts wasn't here, or something like that. I only had Carson Wentz because I traded away everybody else. If I had a full roster at that point, the computer would cut one of my players and sign a backup quarterback, because the team always wants you to have at least 2 quarterbacks. And sometimes this results in starters getting cut. So you don't want that to happen, because whenever that does end up, you know, occurring, it seems like the players just vanish. I've had that happen a bunch in the past. I can remember specifically, I think it happened with like Cameron Hayward once, and he just was nowhere to be found. I checked in free agency, I checked on every team, he just vanished. I don't think he retired. It was a really weird situation, but that can totally happen. So go through and cut your players manually, because it'll save a lot of, you know, frustration later on in case you have a starter who gets cut. All right, so we're gonna move on shortly to like my favorite point in a rebuild, which is going to be the draft. So week 3 is the first time you are able to scout, and also at week 3 there's a chance for there to be a couple draft stories. In this case, there is one. So right outside linebacker Peter Flowers has been around the football field since the day he was born. Whatever, it doesn't matter too much. But Flowers is going to be a pretty good player. I don't think this absolutely guarantees hidden, but I'm pretty certain it at least has a heightened chance that the player is going to have hidden. So Peter Flowers, even if he's like not that great of a player, he's most likely going to at least have a good development trait. So let's go ahead and take a look at Flowers. He is right here. He's a power rusher. B+ hit power, B+ pursuit, B+ power moves. Looks like a pretty decent player. Early first round talent, early first round projection. I'll go deeper into what those mean later in the video, but this guy looks like a pretty good player. He's definitely worth selecting just because he most likely has hidden development trait. Now, normally in videos, I stop at the mid-season mark just to kind of go over the team, potentially use more scouting points, bring back some players, but in this case, I'm just gonna go, we are 1-11. I'm just gonna go straight to week 15 because that's the next time where scouting is super important. We are 1-12, that is hilarious. Now, it's probably because the team is pretty bad looking. There's like no receivers. There are no good running backs either in terms of Madden. But anyway, at week 15, you can check out who won the Heisman. So in this case, it is Travis Stewart. He's a defensive player who won the Heisman. Also, you know, throughout this season, people will tweet about different prospects, or there could be a story like that down there, too tough to cover. Jeff Smolko apparently is a pretty good tight end. But those also kind of like help the overall of the player. So if you're like looking at your draft board throughout the season, paying close attention to it, you can potentially see a rise and a fall in a couple of these players. But most importantly, at least to me, is development trait. So week 3 is important important for development trait, and then week 15 as well. So Travis Stewart, I'm pretty sure this at least guarantees hidden. I could be wrong, but I know for a fact it does not guarantee superstar or superstar X Factor, because there have been a ton of Heisman winners who have drafted who only had star. But Travis Stewart is a safety. He does not look too good. So in this case, I probably would not draft him. Maybe if he fell later in the draft, I would take him, but early first round projection, I would definitely stay away from him. If a receiver wins Heisman, or like a running back, it seems like they have a chance for one of their stats just to be like multiplied by 1,000,000. Like randomly, they'll have like a 99 overall stat if they do win the Heisman. This happened to me recently in a franchise league I was doing with one of my friends. I drafted a receiver who turned out to be like an 83 overall. He's the highest overall player I have drafted across the last 2 Maddens. And he won the Heisman. He had this like 97 catching, like 97 medium route running, something crazy like that. And that's honestly just because he won the Heisman. So taking a look at who won the Heisman is 100% worth your time. Now, we're not going to be in the playoffs, but I do kind of just want to see what Jalen Reagor did, just to show you guys that the slot receiver is pretty important. Carson Wentz actually had a pretty decent year. Not necessarily the more I look at it. A lot of interceptions, not many touchdowns. But Jalen Reagor probably had a great season. Yeah, 77 for 1,278 yards, 8 touchdowns. This happens pretty much all the time with your slot receiver in the Titans playbook. But now let me show you. Miles Sanders was probably awful. He wasn't that bad, but still not great. 4.1 yards per carry, didn't get that many touchdowns. The offense would have been a ton better if I just went out and traded for a running back either in the 90s or close to the 90s. But that's just a quick example about slot receiver and how like lower overall running backs don't play well for me. We're just gonna head straight into the offseason. I normally stop in the Super Bowl as well, just to scout some more and just to check out who wins the Super Bowl. But let's just hop straight into the offseason. I'm not going to talk too much about this because this is pretty self-explanatory. You know, you kind of go into free agency. I have no money because I'm the Eagles, but you normally just go in, you know, give a contract to a player. Normally, if I'm looking to get a player on the team, like if I wanted Chris Godwin, I would go at least 10 points higher than the team in first. That's kind of what I go by. There are some players who I don't really badly need on the team and I'll just kind of chuck a contract at. That happens occasionally. But for Chris Godwin, I would really want Chris Godwin on this team. Maybe not the Eagles because we have no money, but for the most part, I'd want to go after Chris Godwin. So I would give him at least 75 total points. I feel like a 10-point difference will pretty much always get you the player. It's not guaranteed, but it seems to happen quite often. So after the first wave of free agency, it's pretty much all scouting from here on out. So let's just take another look at Peter Flowers. His combine grade is out. He actually fell down a little bit. He was supposed to go early first. Now his talent is mid first. Let me explain to you what both of those mean, because these are probably the most important thing to look at when drafting. So the projection is when he is probably going to be drafted. Early first round projection means he is most likely going to be selected within like the top 10 picks. His talent is where he ranks in the draft. So mid first round talent means his rank is somewhere between 10 and like 20 or something like that, around that area. But let me find a player who has early first round talent. No, late first round talent, again, the later part of the draft. So like 20 to like 32 is when he's probably going to be ranked. And then his early first round projection means he's going to go probably like top 5, top 10, something like that. So drafting him would be a reach, but he did win the Heisman, so he's probably still a pretty decent player. He actually moved up a little bit as well. He was supposed to go second before that, so he looks a little bit better now. Peter Flowers as well would probably be a reach. Let me just find a player who's supposed to go early first round or something like that. Okay, here's a look at an excellent player in this class. Early second round projection, meaning you can probably land him in like the late first round if you just want to be safe. Early first round talent though, so this guy is going to be one of the better players in the entire draft, and you can snag him at the tail end of the first round. It also seems like linebacker is very, very easy to get this year. So Greg Thompson, mid 7th round projection. This means he's going to go very, very late, but he is an early second round talent. So he's probably going to be like a 70, 69, 71, somewhere around there, because he's going to be ranked like 32 to like 42 in that area. He looks like a really, really good looking player as well. He would totally be a player I'd select in this rebuild as well. All right, so here's another player who has incredibly good value. Early 4th round projection, meaning that's where he's probably going to be selected, but early first round talent. He's a player I'd probably take in like the second or like the early 3rd round or something like that, just to make sure I land him, because he looks really good. Now, since he's all the way down here, he probably only has normal development, but still he's going to be like a 76, 77 overall. One of the better corners in this whole class, and he's certainly worth the selection. I'm just going to go straight to the draft now. I don't really feel like scouting all that much longer, but I have the 1st overall pick Of course I do. Let's just take a player, I guess. I don't know. Let's go with one of the players who, you know, had a story about him. So Peter Flowers or Travis Stewart. I'll go with Flowers. Now, this is going to say it's a reach because he is supposed to go mid-first round, and we're going to take him early first round. But this guy probably has hidden. I hope he does at least. He does have hidden development trait. Now, it's probably just because of the draft story, but he's a pretty good-looking player for sure. He would not be a bad starter for this season. I think we have another first-round draft pick, right? Yeah, we have the 10th overall pick. I just want to kind of use this as an example to show you how easy it is to trade up in a draft. We actually have no money. I'll have to get rid of someone pretty expensive, but it's not a big deal. So to trade up in a draft, you pretty much just need the draft pick and like any green interest player. You can trade up from like almost any position then. So let's give him the 10th overall pick and trade him someone kind of expensive. We're going to give him Brandon Graham as well. This will probably work. It did work. We traded up 8 spots, but this would have probably worked for like any first round draft pick. I feel like we could have had the last pick and it still would have went through. And then an 83 overall old defensive end. We'll get this, you know, to go through and we can move up to pick number 2. I guess with this pick, we will go ahead and take the Heisman winner. Let's see if he has hidden development as well. He does. So it seems like Heisman does kind of guarantee a pretty good development trait. Now, this player really isn't that good. Looks like a bit of a project, but maybe his development trait is better than star. But then let me just go ahead and simulate to the next round. Actually, the next pick we have is in the 3rd round. I'll take this cornerback and just show you that this guy is going to be like a top 10 player in this entire class. You know, hopefully he didn't go. I doubt he would have went because it said he was supposed to go in the 4th round, but sometimes the later parts of the draft get a little weird. He is still here. Eddie Childress, probably going to be like a 76. He is the 2nd best player in this entire draft. And we take him at number 65. Only normal development, like I mentioned, but he is a really good-looking player. So drafting is like really easy. If you just break it down and you just look at when these players are actually supposed to go, you can pretty much make sure all of your picks are not reaches, which will pretty much give you a good draft like every time. But there are definitely some times where you need to reach. Just like in the situation of Peter Flowers, if I really badly needed an outside linebacker, I would not have been able to wait until the mid-first round when he was supposed to go. So pretty much anywhere I would have taken him would have been a reach. Same thing with Travis Stewart. If I really wanted a strong safety who I knew had hidden development trait, I would have had to take this guy in the early first round, just to make sure another team, you know, doesn't end up landing him. But here's a look at that middle linebacker. I think I threw him on my draft board. That's why we ended up selecting him. 70 overall, like I said, supposed to go early 2nd round. So it's probably good for like 33rd, 34th, something like that. And linebackers are really easy to develop because they go up in development trait incredibly easily. I want to take a look at one more player. I want to take a look at that defensive tackle I mentioned who was an early first round talent. He is actually the best player in this entire class. He has normal development trait, but he's at number 1 in terms of like overall and stuff like that. But yeah, he's a really good looking player. He would probably, you know, develop really well in a rebuild. But like I said, you can get him in the late first round. This draft class was so weird. Like the top end of the class didn't seem that great. If you look at this, the top like 4 players were all selected fairly late, like the 29th pick, and then the 1st pick in the 2nd round, 1st pick in the 3rd round, 5th pick in the 3rd round. A lot of 76s actually, and then 2 guys in the early 1st. But yeah, like this was a pretty good example, I think, at how to, you know, draft pretty easily. Like I mentioned, drafting really isn't that hard if you just kind of break it down. But I think that is going to conclude this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you guys at least learned something from this. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments about anything in specific, like if I missed anything. If I get a bunch of questions in the comments, maybe I'll come back and make a 2nd version of this video just addressing, you know, those questions. But thanks one more time for watching. Really hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.